Sweet Mistakes. Written by Just Thinking Drabbles. Read by Arashi. Ferdinand wasn't much of a cook, but that didn't mean he didn't like it. His lack of skills could be blamed on the fact that, when he was younger and lived with his father, he wasn't given much of an opportunity to be in the kitchen, since they had servants who cooked their meals. He was thankful, though, that he no longer lived there. Hadn't, for some time, in fact, and was eager to learn all the things he was told were beneath him as a child. And he was even more glad to have his boyfriend Hubert there to show him the ropes. He stared at all the ingredients, bowls, and utensils sitting on the counter. It was an adorable quirk of Hubert's to have all the necessary items out before they began baking, and he felt a little silly realizing how little he knew about what went into baking. It looked more complicated than he had originally thought it to be. That wouldn't stop him from trying, of course. Ferdinand Aegir never backed down from a challenge. Yet he still couldn't help but worry. What if he completely ruined the chocolate chip cookies they were going to make? What if they didn't taste good, and then he'd wasted all of their ingredients and Hubert's time as well? But no, he shouldn't think like that. This was supposed to be something fun for them to do together, and if the cookies did end up being inedible, at least he could say he tried. When Hubert returned to the kitchen to find him having a staring contest with their baking ingredients, he chuckled softly. "Is everything all right?" When Ferdinand turned to respond, and he instantly faltered at the sight of Hubert wearing an apron. It was a lovely gift from Bernadetta, and though it was a little loose around his slender frame, the black color and the little purple flowers which were patterned across it looked very lovely on him. She had made him one too, and it was a beautiful thing made out of a soft red fabric that was covered with sunflowers. He took it from Hubert, who was offering it towards him as he said, "Great! Everything is great. I'm merely excited to learn how to make these cookies." "Is that so?" he asked, and the amused smirk on his lips did not go unnoticed. "Well then, why don't we get started? We have already preheated the oven to the proper temperature and set out the cookie sheet. So now all we need to do is mix the ingredients. Perhaps it is better for you to simply watch for now." He nodded, despite the fact that he wished to be of more use. He watched as Hubert poured several ingredients into 2 separate bowls and began to mix them, most of which Ferdinand knew, but he still found it a little hard to keep track of them all. He wondered, vainly, why cooking couldn't be simpler, or why, at the very least, he could grasp more recipes a little easier. But he did his best to pay attention and try to remember all of the steps. When he saw Hubert reaching for the eggs, he had an idea, and though he wasn't sure how it would work out, he decided to ask anyways. "Can I put them in?" he asked, his amber eyes pleading. Hubert raised a quizzical brow. "Are you sure you're up to it?" "Of course," he replied, a little hurt at the implication that he couldn't even do this small task. "It's cracking an egg. How hard can it be?" "Okay." He handed him the eggs and stepped to the side to allow Ferdinand some room, watching as he placed one egg against the edge of the bowl and proceeded to tap it. "Just make sure to be gentle with it, or else you'll break it." That was what Hubert was going to say, but his words were cut off when Ferdinand did just that. They both stared at the egg yolk dripping onto the counter for a long moment before Hubert turned to get a washcloth to wipe off the counter. I'm sorry," said Ferdinand. He looked a little defeated, and it made Hubert's heart ache to see the sad expression that crossed his face. He gave him what he hoped was a soft smile, in attempts to cheer him up as he rinsed out the cloth and washed his hands from any remaining egg yolk. "Don't worry about it. This is your first attempt. Mistakes are bound to happen. Besides, I've been doing this for a lot longer, and I still make mistakes." "You are just saying that to make me feel better." "I am not." Ferdinand rolled his eyes, still unconvinced that his boyfriend was speaking true. This was a man who organized everything and had a backup plan for his backup plans. He was never unprepared for anything, and it was not likely that he was making any mistakes when it came to this either. "Forgive me, Hubert, but I don't think you are capable of making mistakes with—" Before he could finish his sentence, Hubert took a handful of sugar from the open bag and threw it into his face. He smirked playfully then, and, without a hint of remorse, he placed the same sugar-coated hand against Ferdinand's cheek. Oops! Was it childish to retaliate by taking a handful of sugar and throwing it into his face as well? Certainly it was. Did that stop him? Not in the slightest. But Hubert didn't seem to mind, the fiend, and laughed when Ferdinand attempted to catch him so that he couldn't avoid his next throw. Hubert was quicker, though, and slipped from his grasp easily. Both of them began to throw handfuls of sugar at one another as they tried to be the victor of their sudden little game, though most of it often missed their intended targets and instead fell to the floor or the countertops. But neither of them minded the mess. Cleaning it up was just another thing they could do together, and that was an opportunity that they would never turn down. Their game ended when Ferdinand caught Hubert's hand and halted him from fleeing. He smiled at him, bright and genuine, and filled with all the love he felt for the man before him. Hubert smiled back, and it was smaller, but filled with no less adoration than his. It made his heart swell with joy to see him so happy. Unable to contain the way he felt for his wonderful boyfriend, Ferdinand stepped forward and placed a gentle kiss against his nose. He could taste the sweetness of the sugar, which powdered Hubert's face, and heard a soft gasp of surprise that he made at the unexpected gesture, and it made his heart race within his chest. The cookies weren't baked yet, and they would surely take longer as both of them stopped to clean up the mess they had made. But that was okay. No matter what faced Ferdinand, he would not be deterred from the challenge, so long as Hubert was by his side.